Recorded Monday, 4th of April 2011, you're listening to the Wild Paw Dog Podcast. The Wild Paw Podcast this week was sponsored by dougalsden.co.uk. Amazing finds for the furry kind. Well, Karen, here we are back again for another episode.
I know, that's come around really quickly, hasn't it? Wow, what a week, John. I've been so busy.
Really? Why is that?
Yeah. Oh, well, I don't know if well, I know you know, but the listeners may not know that I'm getting married in about 4 or 5 weeks. And it's just all coming together now. And it's so difficult because obviously I'm still seeing all my clients and I want to keep up with my website and keep up, up to date with all my friends on Twitter and, and then getting married and looking after my own dog. So it's been really hectic. So the time's gone so quickly.
I've just been playing some applause there in the background. That's applause from Sweden and Kennel Björkwood, and that's an exciting planning thing. Are your dogs, are they going to be, what's the word, Page Wolf and Page Girl Wolf?
No, they're not. I mean, it's a bit. I'd love to have them there, and I think they would allow me to have them there. But the problem is that I would be feeling really responsible for them, and my wedding day, I really don't want to feel like I've got to keep an eye on where the dogs are all the time, and I think they'd cope with it really well. They're pretty good, but a friend of ours is gonna have them for the day so that they have a nice peaceful day playing with their other doggy friends. So, but I may dress them a little bit in, a little fancy bow tie or something, just, for the occasion.
Well, this week, Karen, we're going to be talking about how to stop your dog jumping up. And there's a bark coming from the background. If you're a regular listener, you'll know that the Basset Hounds of Lindbergh and Shafira will bark occasionally while I'm recording. So let's hope that they don't, and I don't have to go and pause it. So we're talking how to stop your dog jumping up. Why is that important, Karen?
Well, it's really important because it's one of those things that is a natural occurrence and seems to be highly prevalent with any dog owner. The important part of it is that it's a very normal occurrence. I think that's the first thing that people forget. They sort of, everyone says, the dog might jump up, as if it's something that the dog has, suddenly done as a big surprise. And actually, it's not like that at all. And funnily enough, when I was at the APBC conference a couple of weeks ago, Gwen Bailey, who runs the puppy schools over here, extremely good quality puppy school. If you do get the chance and you have got a puppy, then do attend one of Gwen's, because they're very, very carefully monitored. But they'd actually taken results from the puppy schools themselves and looked at how successful they were in training the puppies to do certain things. Now, they had a huge amount of success in every area to do with socialization and, just generally having a really relaxed puppy that didn't have behavioural problems when it was older. The one thing she did say, which she's now going to deal with, is that all of the dogs seem to jump up no matter what. When the owners were reporting, what does your puppy do now they're a bit older, jumping up was a problem still. Not a massive problem, but enough to be noticeable above all the success of the others, So it is quite a pernicious and persistent issue. Now, you've mentioned about the Bassets. I'm assuming you've had your own experience of it.
Oh, yeah. I mean, I've worked. I'm a qualified dog trainer, and I work with them. And having 3 at once, they do. They just jump up. My glasses have got knocked out of shape by being headbutted by Smudge right onto my left glass lens. And I mean, I think the best way of doing this is. The way I was taught to train this is that one person has the dog, the other person greets you, and if the dog jumps up, the person who's coming ignores it and carries on walking. That's how we taught it.
Yeah, and that's a really good way of doing it, particularly if you have a young puppy. For example, I saw a puppy on Saturday morning, absolutely adorable little Jack Russell Terrier, really, really sweet little dog, and very excited to see me when I came in and jumping about and tiddled on the floor in excitement as well. Now, for an early age puppy, it's not that unusual. If it carries on doing that when it's older, then obviously we'd have to look at it. But, it was very, very excited. So that's the first thing, when a visitor comes in, unless you've got a house like with a revolving door fitted to the front door, which is what I sometimes think we're going to have fitted, that it is a big event for the dog. So the dog can get very, very excited. So even from tiny puppyhood, quite often it's a big event. So that's the first thing, isn't it? That, your visitor's trying to get in and you're trying to get to the door and you're trying to open the door and not let the dog run out, which is the other part of it. And you want the dog to be friendly, don't you? I mean, you don't want the dog to be frightened of people coming in. Well, even if it's you, if it's anybody else, you don't want that.
No, we talked about this a bit. I think it was in last week's episode, actually, Karen, or maybe the one before, where you talked about how, when you come in, you want to be able to take your shoes off, you want to be able to go in and put the kettle on and sort of not get overexcited and not encourage the dogs to be rewarded by your excitement.
Absolutely. And that's right. And it's related to, in that case, we were talking about attachment and related to separation anxiety, weren't we? Where, if a dog is so bonded with you and they go absolutely crackers every time you come in, then they can't cope without you. So, it's a really good lesson, full stop, isn't it? You come in, you act very relaxed, you ignore them. Now, that's fine. But what it doesn't necessarily do is give the dog an alternative behaviour. So, are they jumping up just to be because they're excited, or are there more things in there? So, if you can ignore it, that's fine. Sometimes it's not terrifically fair to ask your visitors to ignore it because, as you say, if a dog's jumping up, it's really difficult not to pay attention to them. And I've had bruises just from an enthusiastic dog sort of pawing at me as I come in. And I had a massive bruise on my leg not that long ago from that. It wasn't particularly rough dog. It just caught me on the leg and it really, really hurt. So, they are sort of guaranteed to get your attention because, they find the attention rewarding. Now, that brings me on to quite an important question, which is quite often, I'm still asked this, even now, is the dog trying to be dominant? Are they jumping up because they're trying to be dominant? They're trying to, push their way forward and show me that they're really important and that as you know, and I've said before, it's a very outdated theory. Unfortunately, it's still around, but it doesn't really serve any purpose other than sort of ending up with us punishing the dog and thinking the dog is deliberately trying to be horrible, which they are not. I do think that a visitor coming to the door is a big event, as I've said, but generally, they are doing a natural behaviour. They are wanting to get to you and say, wow, look, it's somebody there. And the reason they jump up is, when I ask my clients, why are they jumping up? Why aren't they jumping at your knee? Unless they're really tiny, what is it? And the obvious place they're trying to reach is, as you said, with your glasses being knocked off, they're trying to reach your face. If you watch dogs greet other dogs, especially little dogs greeting big dogs, they will do it as well. They will jump up at each other because the face is there, so we happen to be, on two legs rather than four.
Sure.
So, of course, they're trying to get up to where your face is because that's the main activity centre, isn't it?
Yeah.
Lots of clues. They can smell your breath. They can see your eyes. They can see what your eyes are doing. They can look at your expression. It's probably a better idea as a young puppy to crouch down when you're helping them to learn what to do, rather than stand up way on high and then have these little puppy legs all up your knee, and then you have to bend down and push them off, and then it becomes a bit of a routine, doesn't it? So, crouching down, as long as they're not going to knock you over, is a nice way to greet a dog.
I think for me, because I've had litters here, and I do nothing but ignore them when they jump up at me early on. One of the key reinforcers that undermines my training is that there I am out in the garden or out walking them, and someone will come along and they'll get excited because they'll go, "Ooh, look, dogs," and they'll come over and they'll sort of do something that the dog gets excited and jumps up, and I'll say, please ignore them. And they're like, no, it's okay. I love dogs.
Yeah, visitors are great saboteurs, aren't they? And children and, any other member of your family that says, oh, no, he's all right, I don't mind. And you're there desperately trying to train them and thinking, oh, please don't do that.
Yeah.
So this is my other way of doing it. And what I did was I listed 5 really good tips on what to do about it, because it's, in my opinion, it's not naughty. It's not dominant. It's not, the dog trying to take over. Yeah, that awful noise. I've heard that. A puppy play group, of all the places somebody started doing that. It was just like, oh, please don't. It's not necessarily a punishable offence, but you can punish in other ways. You don't need to physically correct a dog to stop it jumping up. And if anything, that's quite the opposite to what you should do, because what you don't want is the dog to see a person and then anticipate something painful or scary. That is a very, very bad way of training your dog.
Yeah.
It doesn't make sense to train your dog like that in the long term. It might work in the temporary, instant measure, but after that, the dog then starts thinking, actually, people coming through the door is horrible. So there's, 5 top tips, really, for getting it right.
Okay, what's number 1 then, Karen?
So number 1, first of all, like I've said, it's a bit unfair to ask your visitor to deal with a jumping dog, and also they may not do exactly what you want. So the first thing you must do, if you've got a persistent problem already, is make physical measures possible. So, first of all, you've got to get the visitor in the house and allow the dog time to calm down without the dog leaping all over the visitor. So making it a non-event. So you can quite easily, depending on the layout of your house, there are loads of ways of doing this. Close a connecting door so the dog is behind the door. Get a stair gate across your hallway if you have to, or across the next doorway where the dog is. A lot of people have the hallway and then there's a kitchen, so the dog quite often is in the kitchen or the utility. Put a stair gate across the doorway. Or if you can't do that and you're physically able to, use a lead or a house line and make sure that the dog is clipped to it ready for when the visitor comes, or hang it somewhere near the door. Now, what I should say is these are only training measures. They are not permanent ones. So, yes, okay, it's so easy to say it, isn't it? Well, I stopped my dog jumping up because I just shut the door. So, if you didn't want to do any more than that, at least that gets you part of the way there, particularly if you have a very big, very, very lively dog. So that then allows you to do exactly what we've just said, which is completely ignore any kind of excitement. Then you're breaking the reward cycle. You're allowing the dog to calm down. You're giving the visitor space to come in, get them a cup of tea or whatever, do your various things, and then allow the dog to greet them when the visitor's calm, when the dog is calm and the visitor. Well, to be fair, John, actually, if you've got the kind of visitor that says, oh, dogs, like that, then it might be better to say, yes, come on in, we'll get them in a minute,
we'll just put
and
you on
sort
a
of
lead.
organise them. Yeah, we'll just go and get them and bring them in. So then, of course, you can get the control in place, ready for the next stage, which is any training that you might want to do. If you've got the dog on a lead, or, as I say, a house line, which is just a thin line that's a little bit longer, a couple of meters, about sort of 6 foot line. If the dog then goes crazy again because they're in the room with the visitor, you can organise the dog and move them away, wait for them to get calm, and then give them another opportunity to say hello. The point is that dogs do need to learn what to do, and their natural instinct is to go crazy and jump about, or go crazy and run away, depending on what they're like. But, go crazy, get really excited, and then everybody settles down. But we don't want that, so therefore we've got to give them chance to calm down and then reward them when they're calm. That makes sense, doesn't it?
Oh, absolutely. Absolutely. And I suppose having someone come to your house is one of the most loaded situations for a dog, isn't it?
Yeah, absolutely.
That's it. People coming past, delivery people, it is. And they pick up on it so quickly, don't they?
It's something we underestimate how exciting it is, because if you've got a dog that's sort of in the house all day, they go out for their walks, the association with the door is hugely exciting anyway. So therefore, it's going to be a big event, even though we're so used to it. For them, it's a big deal, so don't ever underestimate that. So number 2, which leads me nicely onto it, actually, teaching door manners. I've talked about this before. How many of our dogs go absolutely crazy around the door when it's time for a walk? It doesn't matter which door. It could be that the lead is produced and they go crazy. But the idea is, the dog sees the door opening. It's a massive trigger. They can suddenly get outside. Wow, they can smell the outdoors. They know we're going out. Wow, exciting. So as soon as they get around the door, they've learned very quickly that it's a massively rewarding thing. So you might have the problem where your dog dashes out of the door, whether your visitor is there or not. You do need to take time to teach the dog that they stay calm around the door. If they don't stay calm around the door, nothing happens. No walk, no visitor coming in, no freedom, no social event at all. The door doesn't open. you would need to set this up, of course, and there's lots of ways of training it. I tend to use every single opportunity I can when the door is open to teach my dogs that they don't go through the door unless I've asked them to. They do not go through the door. They never, never, never do. So they are not allowed to independently go through that door. And just because I open it doesn't mean that they're going to get excited. So I can quite happily stand in my hallway and open and shut the door and get the dog to, I mean, if I'm at risk of the dog running out, obviously I'd put them on a lead or a line. And so, just because the door is opening and shutting, it doesn't mean we go outside. We don't go outside until I'm out there and I say, okay then.
How do you
and the
teach
rest of the time it doesn't.
How do you
teach it? It's probably another podcast in itself. But what I normally do is I have no association with the door handle and movement. So I will stand there with the dog in a place away from the door, so that I've got enough space to open the door and get myself round or let a visitor in. So they're beyond that boundary.
Right.
I usually have a lead attached to them. Sometimes I'll hold the lead. Sometimes I'll just have it on the floor, but my foot on it. It depends on the dog and the speed and how much they've got a problem. And then I put my hand on the door. And if they take a step towards the door, even the slightest inch in, I put them back where I want them. We start again. But what I don't do is teach them to sit. Then I open the door and do it that way. And the reason I don't do that, John, is this.
What?
Yes, I can teach my dogs to sit. The problem I've got, though, or I might have, is that someone else might come in the door and not tell my dog to sit. Or we might have people working on the house that just go in and out. So I do not want my dog to associate anything other than I'm on the other side of the door and I'm saying, come on then. That's the only time they are ever allowed to go through the door. So they have to stand there whether they've been told to sit or not. Do you see what I mean? So it's kind of like it's what I call silent training. The dog, just because the door's open or shut, nothing happens. They don't need to be told to wait there. They just wait there anyway.
And of course, that makes perfect sense. And while you're talking about that, Karen, I'm also thinking about something that we talked about in the past, the way that, we cue to the dog that we're going out because we put on the same, I always wear the same coat when I go out with the dogs, or, that they spot these routines, so that teaching something like that, is really vital. I think that's a show in itself, as you rightly say, Karen. Definitely.
And you can add in as many commands as you like. I'm not saying don't ever do that, but I do think it's fatal to only ever teach your dog that they sit at the door when you've told them to sit.
Yeah.
I teach them that they sit at the door when the door is touched, opened an inch. They don't have to sit. They just have to not move forward, and they have to stay where I've placed them. So, it's a safety thing. But yeah, I think a whole podcast on that would be a really good idea. And I've got some great photos as well for a feature on that. So, which I actually did for a magazine. So I'll get onto that, I think.
So, so with the 5 tips, we've got 1, physical measures.
Yeah.
We've got 2, teaching door manners.
Yep.
And what's the third one?
The third one, now this is a training thing. When I say training, it's more formal. You teach what I call the off command. You can say wait or anything, but it basically means back away and wait. So if you've got something the dog wants in front of them, such as a visitor, then you can say off. And the dog, because the dog is wanting to get to the visitor, let's assume they are in this scenario when the dog's jumping up, they hear off. What they learn to do is sit back and the visitor comes to them, rather than the other way round. So off is like a very specific training scenario. You start off with some food in your hand. You teach the dog to back away from the food. You use the off command. So the dog learns that the quicker they back away, the quicker the food arrives. Then you start to use toys or things like that, things that the dog wants. Anything the dog wants will work. You can use movement. You can use, anything that the dog is going to go towards. And you say off, and they have to sit back, and then you pick it up or whatever you do, and then you go to the dog. That is absolutely one of the biggest parts of the dog training toolkit that I've put together. If you don't teach off, the dog doesn't learn any self-control either. So you have to teach them on a word that, yes, there is the visitor. Yes, you do want to see them, but the only way you're going to get to see them is if you sit back and wait for them.
But that sounds like woof, off.
Yes. And it used to be said, it's one of Dr. Ian Dunbar's commands, actually, that I've sort of developed a little bit. The reason that they used to do it like that was because it sounded a bit like a sort of woofy warning, like a back off sort of noise. But now I tend to say it because it's something that not many, you don't say it in your normal conversation very often. So it comes out quite clearly to the dog, and it's a very short sound, so they can distinguish it quite quickly. Where it goes wrong is where people start shouting it or going, they'll teach it in an escalation. So they'll go off, 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 like that.
Bark,
and it's
bark,
like the
bark.
dog starts thinking,
Okay.
So you don't need to do that. I say to my clients, if I hear them starting to do that, no, you say it like the off part of the word coffee. Off, like that, nice and soft. I mean, you can say coffee. I don't mind.
Off. Coffee.
So it's just enough to go, that's enough. But the idea is it's a motivating word. It's actually a motivation. It's not supposed to be scary at all.
I like that. Good idea. That's a good tip.
It's one of my favourites. And a lot of people have come back to me. Clients over the years have always said, that off, that's really good, that is. I actually did a video on it, which was on my site. I'm not sure if it's still on there because we've had a bit of a rejig. But I actually showed my children how to teach it. And then we videoed it, and then we extended it to walking around if the dog's jumping up at your legs. So it is an absolute key part of your training. And I would advise everyone, if you don't teach anything else, teach that, because it is really easy and it's really effective.
Okay, what about number 4 then?
Well, number 4, I've kind of touched on this a little bit. Depending on the layout of your house and how easy this is, I often teach what we call a placement cue. Now, that sounds very sort of technical, but basically you're associating the doorbell or a knock at the door with go to your bed or sit on your mat or something like that. Now, you can do this. You can place a mat in the corner of your hallway if you have space and teach your dog to go there. Now, what you can do is combine it with, number 2 tip, which is teaching the dog not to go crazy around the door, and just plonk them on the mat every time. And if they move off the mat, you put them back on the mat as the door opens. But it's much easier to be able to hear the doorbell and the dog immediately goes to their mat. Now, that sounds magic, doesn't it? And you've said about magic mat training before, I know, John. The difference is that you just associate, rather than you saying mat, you just make the mat be a consequence of the doorbell going. So you train it on cue. The cue is initially go to your mat and you throw a treat there and the dog goes on there, or go to your bed. And then you start to ring the doorbell and say go to your mat. And then you just ring the doorbell and the dog goes to their mat, or knock on the door or whatever. So it's a very steady, predictable routine for the dog.
Do you hear the barking in the background?
I can, yeah.
Yes.
Can they hear me? Mat.
Yes, that was good. So now we've got physical measures, teach door manners, teaching the off command. And what's next?
Well, we've done placement cue, and then the final tip, number 5, is practice. Practice. We are trying to make what is effectively unpredictable in the sense that the visitor can come at any time, but predictable in the sense that we know the dog is going to jump up. We know that's what they want to do. So we're not completely baffled as to where this is going to go if we leave it. So practice. Get the same visitor to come in one day, ask one of your neighbours or a friend or even a family member. If the problem is jumping up at everyone, a family member will do the trick. Come in, get them to ring the doorbell, have your training measures set up, get them to come in. Obviously they might have to wait outside for a little while. This is why it's a good idea to set it up. Get them to come, ring the doorbell or whatever they normally do while you get the dog sorted out. You let them in while the dog is there, calm. If the dog stays calm, they can greet the dog. If the dog isn't, you wait till it's calm. Then what they do is come in, sneak out the back door, go around the house if your house is laid out like that, come back in, ring the doorbell again, and off you go. So you could do plenty of repetitions of that and get lots and lots of practice in probably only about 20 minutes. It depends how long it takes your dog to calm down. But by the end of the session, you should see a great deal of progress, even just that, because it's very full on and it's very intensive.
But do you find that, say, if you're training with, a family friend or a family member, that the dog starts to suss, now it's Karen that's coming, so I'm not going to jump up. And then when the UPS delivery man comes, the dog goes crazy. Well,
this is the interesting thing about training, isn't it? That a dog has to, they learn certain signals and they learn certain procedures. So it's not all about who it is. It's to do with partly the doorbell ringing, the time of day, the silhouette in the doorway, lots of other things. But even if you've got yourself, 30, 40, 50% of the way there, and yeah, okay, it was the same person, you then recruit another person and get them to do the same thing, and then recruit another person and get them to do the same thing. And then maybe, if you're having a family gathering, if you've got that kind of household, which a lot of people do, you make it so that, okay, you warn everyone in advance. Okay, well, we'll see you for lunch. Do you want to come about half an hour earlier? And what we're going to do, would it be all right if? And then you get them on your side and you get them to do things that you are instructing them to do with coming in the doorway. And for those visitors, now this is the really good thing. For those visitors that are, oh, no, it's okay, I don't mind, or come on, boy, stroke, 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 while the dog is sort of halfway up their ear hole. You get those people on board. So I do use treat training for this as well. Put a pot of treats outside, teach the visitor that, okay, give them something to do. If they're that kind of visitor and they want to interact, great, use it. Say, okay, well, look, that would be really good. I really want you to help me because I'm going to have the dog doing, on the lead or whatever, and they're going to be sitting on their mat. So when you come in, you can say hello to them by throwing a treat for them. Would you do that? So you're actually getting the person to cooperate with you rather than saying, it's really hard for some people to do nothing. I mean, let's be fair, they probably love dogs and your dog probably loves them. So if they can't wait for the dog to calm down and they really want to do something, say, all right, well, toss a treat to the mat so that they stay on their mat. And look, aren't they clever? And thank you so much for helping me train my dog. And that is a really good way of getting around this problem. And the same thing goes for in the street, John, as well. When people sort of say, oh, I love dogs, immediately step in a kind of nice, assertive way and say, great, would you throw them a treat for me because I'm trying to teach them a trick? And they'll be like, oh, cooperation, rather than don't touch. And that's good with children as well. You always have to be very careful involving children in training. Make sure the dog's really quite good with you and with other adults before you involve them, if you can. But as soon as you do, give them very strict instructions on what to do and how to involve them. Because otherwise, if you tell them, no, don't do that, don't do that, don't do that, what they'll do, as dogs will do, they'll do it when your back is turned and you won't have any control over it. So get them on side. That's what I try and do anyway. It works quite well.
And of course, with practice, it's not just a case of doing it for a couple of weeks. Sometimes you have to return to training, if the behaviour comes back. Just a thought though, Karen, what if your dog, does get overly excited when someone comes and you personally start to stress yourself? Obviously, this is about, us not signaling to the dogs that we're worried, that we're stressed. It is about being, calm and going through the whole process of training when we feel calm, not actually just deciding, I'm going to train this now when the next person comes. Yeah,
you've got to set yourself up for success. Just as you would in any training or in anything in life, you don't try and read the first book on, say, for example, you have an interest in why you got a headache. You don't pick up a book on brain surgery and try and read it in a noisy station. You go somewhere quiet, you make it easy, you pick an easy thing to do first. You maybe read the back of the paracetamol packet. You've got to start simple and work your way onto the complex. So if you're getting stressed, it's not a good time to start to train anything. That's why I recommend physical measures, because by the time I see a lot of my clients, they've got to the point where they just do not know what else to do. And they might have tried, training a few of these things that I've mentioned. In fact, probably a lot of people listening, I'm sure, are nodding and saying, yeah, I've done that, but it didn't really work. And I've done that and it didn't really work. You have to buy yourself some time. Don't wait for a random event. Get the physical measures in place. Then at least you have a fallback position. If you're not in the mood for it or the dog is having a really hyper day, at least you can just pop them behind the stair gate and think, right, I don't have to deal with that right now. Because not every day is perfect for training. And I'm exactly the same, and even Grisha Stewart at the BAT training seminar I was at. Grisha is a very well-known dog trainer from Seattle. Highly professional, extremely good at what she does. Even she will say, she's not great at training her own dog all the time. I think that's the case for everyone. We're all human beings. I don't have this perfect household with, Disney-fied dogs. Sometimes I have to shut my dogs out of the way because I just think, you know what? I don't really want to do this right now. So it's okay. It's fine. What you've got to try and do, though, is don't repeat the problem. So if you do nothing else, at least put a barrier up, but set a goal so that you do have in long term, okay, today I'm feeling okay. I know so-and-so is coming round at 10 o'clock. So, and I've warned them in advance, I'm going to get the lead out and we're going to do this. And it really does work when you put your mind to it.
And high octane treats.
High octane, absolutely. If you're going to get the visitor to give the dog treats, then they've got to be really, really scented so that the dog is more interested in the hands than the body. Or if you throw them on the floor, it's usually quite a good idea, especially if you have lots of children coming, to get them to throw the treats onto the floor, particularly onto the dog's mat area where you decided to station the dog. That's because some children do not want a dog anywhere near them because they're actually quite frightened. And if you start to feed treats from children's hands, then obviously that's going to encourage your dog to come forward and sniff their hands. And it can be misinterpreted sometimes. So again, even you could be the reverse. You could be saying, oh, the dog's fine. And the child visitor is saying, no, I really don't want to do this. I really don't. So it's probably safer and more sensible to just get them to throw the treat towards the mat area. Then you've got a dog that anticipates that a treat's going to come, and they will dive onto their mat in the hope that it's going to arrive. But to be fair, not every dog responds to treats. This is why I'm saying about the silent training for the door and the placement cues and the off command as well. So you've got a really versatile array of getting success there.
So we've got 5 tips that you can take away from listening to this discussion here. We've got the physical measures, teaching door manners, teaching the off command, teaching a placement cue, and then practicing. And I know, Karen, that you've written a special handout that talks about this in more detail. Where can people get that?
What I'm going to do, it's on my website, which is www.intellidogs.com. If you go into the Builder Training Manual section, it's on there under adult dogs and puppies. But also on the blog that's linked to this podcast, I'm going to put a straightforward link to it so that you can just get that one. It's only $2.99. And it's very, very, very straightforward. It goes into it in a little bit more detail, and it describes the off command and how to teach that, plus a couple of the other things that we've mentioned. So, there's no such thing as the all-encompassing perfect guide, but I am a bit of a perfectionist, so I've tried to put as much on there as possible. And it's an ebook, so it's a download, so you get it straight away.
And $2.99 translates into about $4.8 US if you're one of our American listeners. All right, Karen, that's some really good tips there. Before we wrap things up, I think it's time for this week's bark.
Oh, we've got a bark, yes.
Yep, this week is Lola.
Lola. I know Lola very, very well. And, she doesn't bark much. She's a very peaceful girl. She's a Hungarian Wirehead Vizsla, and she comes and stays with us quite a lot. So I thought I'd give her a bit of a whirl because, she's kind of not quite my own dog, but, So you excuse the self-indulgence, everybody.
All right. Okay, here comes Lola. Oh, well done, Lola. That wasn't super loud barking. It was more a sort of okay, I'll bark for you.
That's Lola all over, really. I think she's quite a laid-back girl, and she sometimes spooks at things, which is something that we're always aware of. But she's the kind of dog that when you go in the morning, because she stays with us quite a lot, you go in the morning and all the other dogs are like, "Let's go, yeah," and Lola just stays in bed, and she actually puts her paw right over her nose and curls really tiny ball in her basket and does not want to get up. So she's very laid back.
Oh, Lola, you are related to my Agsy. I can tell. That's exactly what Aggie would do in the morning. Can I hide under the rolls of skin over my eye? Brilliant. If you've got a clip of your doggy barking, you can usually tape them on your tape. That dates me, doesn't it? You can record them on your iPhone or your Android or something like that. Do send it along, and you can send us a message or a question, or if you've got some comments about today's show or anything else for that matter, you can send your clips, your questions to podcast@intellidogs.com. Karen, have we got any bits of news before we wrap?
Oh, yes, a little bit of news. Well, I started off the podcast saying, how stressed I was. And actually, a very timely piece of published research where, a psychologist from Queen's University Belfast has said that dog owners tend to have lower blood pressure and lower cholesterol. She said that regular walks may partly explain the difference. What basically is Dr. Deborah Wells, she reviewed lots and lots of earlier research papers, as I believe it's called a meta-study, where they look at the health benefits of pet ownership. And actually, the research showed, it even went as far as to suggest that the social support offered by an animal is greater than the support that another human being can offer.
Wow.
I know. So, dog owners suffered fewer minor ailments, fewer serious medical problems, and dog owners in particular, compared to owners of other pets such as, such as cats, for example. So their dogs can help people in recovery from serious illness, things like heart attacks. And as we know from, the medical detection dogs, they can detect, give an early warning system for things like epileptic seizure and that kind of thing. So basically, she said, it is possible that dogs can directly promote our well-being by buffering us from stress, one of the major risk factors associated with ill health. So there you go. So I don't need to be stressed. I just need to cuddle Bonnie.
Oh, that's okay. There's this aura of calm about both of us. I can see it. Not.
So guys listening, okay, so you're listening to a podcast that's all about how to train your dog, and maybe your dog is stressing you out. Imagine what it would be like if you didn't have your dog. It would not be better because the research proves it. So there you go. No matter how bad it sounds, it's never going to be as bad as you seem.
Karen, I've got a final question for you. How's it going with Skinny Paws?
Oh, we had to do the Madonna challenge last week. My poor arms, they're killing me. I don't know how Madonna does it. I really don't. Anyway, this week, what we're doing, I'm on a special slimming plan. Now, that it's healthy eating really, but I'm determined not to be squeezing into my wedding dress. I want it to fit comfortably, so that's what I'm going to do. So from now until my wedding day, that's what I'm going to be doing. But also this week, I'm going to be doing a fitness video every single day. I'm allowed 1 day's rest. So fitness video every single day. I'm going to do Davina McCall's videos, DVDs with Jackie Wren, who's the lady who sponsored us for the first week that time. And I'm going to be super toned, super fit. And my dogs are going to be super toned and fit as well, because we're still doing the long walks that we were doing from week 1. So I'm finding the time.
Brilliant. And if you want to sponsor the Skinny Paws project, where should somebody go?
Well, you can either go to the Skinny Paws website, which has our blog on it, which will hopefully make you giggle, which is www.skinnypaws.com. Or you can just, if you really want to, and if you've got any spare pocket money, please donate it. All the money goes to medical detection dogs. It's a fantastic cause. And that's www.justgiving.com/skinnypaws. And I'll put the links on my blog as well. But please do, even if it's, only a couple of quid, the charity really need our support. And they're such a great charity. Dogs working with people. Brilliant. In my eyes, what more could you want? What a great charity. And they really do deserve our support. So I really hope that even if you just send me an encouraging message on Twitter, that would be nice. But a donation would be lovely. Thank you.
Well, that's it for this week. Thanks very much for listening. If you're a new listener, welcome to the Wild Paw Dog Podcast, and we hope you'll stick around. You can find previous episodes on Karen's blog at intellidogs.com, or go to iTunes. Just Google us, iTunes Wild Paw, and you'll find the link right near the top, and you'll find about just over 20 previous episodes. If you want to get more information about Karen's training or build your own tailor-made training manual for a very reasonable amount of cash, just visit intellidogs.com. And remember, you can always send us a tweet on Twitter, and Karen's at twitter.com/wildpaw, and I'm at twitter.com/John Buskell, and I'll spell that out for you. It's JONBUSCALL. All right then, Karen, thank you so much for this week's show.
Oh, you're welcome. Next week, we're going to do readers' questions, or listeners' questions. Listen to me, readers. Listeners' questions. I've got a couple here already, and thank you everyone for sent them in. If you've got a question that you want to ask about your dog, then please get in touch, send it in, and we will try and include you on the show.
All right then, Karen. Talk to you next time.
Thanks, John.
The Wild Paw Dog Podcast was sponsored by dougalsden.co.uk. Amazing finds for the furry kind.